Hi all, and welcome to my darkroom. You'll notice that it's a lot less dark than it is yellow today. That's because we're making Calotype prints, and they are only sensitive to ultraviolet light, meaning we get to see the magic happening before our very eyes. If you've never heard of Calotypes, that's okay. I was once dull and uncultured like you. Today, you take your first steps toward being a more well-rounded person. Calotypes are a cool historic process for printing photographs. They fall under the wider umbrella of alt processes. Now, I'm not a chemist, but basically you're using silver and iron salts to form an image, and then usually toning that image in a more precious metal to change its color and make it more permanent. So let's get started. First, we grab our negative. I'm using a digital negative, inkjet printed on Pictorico transparency film, because the largest format I shoot is 4x5, and 4x5 prints cannot slake my unquenchable thirst for large prints, although apparently 6x8 can. Fun fact about digital negatives. You can start with a digitally captured image if you want. I once watched Bill Schwab make a platinum print from an iPhone photo. I wanted to give some kind of pithy one-liner about the sacrilege of printing iPhone photos in platinum, but honestly, the print looked really good, and Bill Schwab seems like a chill dude, so I'll just keep my mouth closed. I'm going to lightly mark the corners of my image on the paper with a pencil, so I know more or less how much area to cover with my sensitizer. What sensitizer, you ask? It's this cool juice I'm making over here. 20 drops of ferric oxalate solution, 20 drops of silver nitrate solution, and a couple of drops of tween 20 solution, the most uncomfortably named chemical I own. Give that a swirl and pour it onto the paper. Now, I try to get a nice even coat with this brush. I did pre-wet the brush a little bit with distilled water so it wouldn't soak up all my sensitizer. I used to mask the borders of my paper with tape to get a clean line to my image, but now I just embrace the brush marks look because it's très artistique. The paper I'm using is Hahnemühle Platinum Rag, or HPR as the cool kids call it. Other good options are Arches Platine and Berger COT 320. I've never actually used those two, but they seem to come up a lot in discussions about alt process printing, so they're probably safe options. If you want to try it, do yourself a favor and just start with one of those three. You'll save yourself a lot of headaches from trying to get cheaper papers to work. Ask me how I know. Yeah, these high-end papers, specifically designed for alt process printing, are kind of expensive, but you're worth it. I'll let this sheet dry in the dark for about an hour. If you live somewhere humid, it might take longer. I live in the desert. Silver linings.
1 hour later.
Let's pop these bad boys into my contact printing frame. These frames are weirdly expensive, so I built my own. When contact printing, you go emulsion to emulsion, so the side of my digital negative that has ink on it is in contact with the side of the paper that has dried yellow juice on it. The frame squeezes them together really tight and flat so the print comes out sharp. Now we'll stick it under the UV lights. I just bought a couple of UV LED strips from Amazon and packed them onto a piece of plywood, then added walls and feet, and it actually works really well. My exposure time with this setup is 3.5 minutes. You'll have to do some test strips to figure out yours. Once exposed, there's a super weak image formed on the paper. The developer will really bring that out. There's lots of developers out there for Calotype printing. I've settled on sodium citrate because it's cheap and not hazardous, and I have no sense of adventure. You'll also notice I'm using a flat bottom tray instead of a normal darkroom tray with ridges or channels in the bottom. That's a surprise tool that will help us later. Developing a Calotype has lots of steps. You can set up 38 trays in a line to make your Calotypes if you want. My darkroom is measured in square centimeters instead of square feet, so I go with a one-tray method. When you pour the developer in, make sure you get all of the paper covered as quickly as possible. If there's more than about a second between one area getting developer and another area, you'll have a permanent and noticeable line of demarcation in your final print. This is the coolest part of the process to me. It's fun to watch. As you can see, the image appears more or less instantaneously, but it's really important to agitate the print in the developer for a full 2 minutes. This is for boring chemical reasons. I actually give it 3 minutes in the developer to be safe because it's more or less impossible to overdevelop. You could do 20 minutes if you wanted and it would be fine. I replenish my developer at a rate of about 1 milliliter of fresh developer for every square inch of image. This is roughly 6x8, so I'll pour 50 millimeters of fresh developer into my bottle of working developer. Then pour back the stuff in the tray when I'm done with it, of course. Next, we'll do a couple of rinses. I have really alkaline tap water with metals in it, which is basically the worst thing you could let touch a Calotype at this stage, so I keep a jug of acidified tap water on hand for this step. I add just enough citric acid to get the pH down below 7. In my case, 1/8 of a teaspoon of citric acid in a gallon of tap water gives me about 6.5 for my pH. I've never had issues with iron stains in my print using this to rinse. So 2 back-to-back rinses of 1 minute each in this water, and then it goes down the drain from the tray. Now we do a clearing bath, which is 3% citric acid, a little bit stronger than the rinse water. I guess you can reuse this stuff, but citric acid is really cheap, so I just use it one shot. I clear for 5 minutes. This is basically getting all the unexposed and undeveloped sensitizer out of the paper and leaving only the image. If you don't do it enough, you'll have yellowish highlights instead of white, and I think they'll stain brown over time too. You'll see your shadows getting considerably lighter while you clear, sometimes alarmingly so. Don't worry, you'll get your Dmax back in toning. After clearing, I tone. You can tone in lots of different stuff. Selenium, gold, platinum, palladium, weird stuff like lead acetate, etc. Gold toning gives me a really good image permanence, a pretty decent Dmax, and a really nice purplish color that I think looks great for a lot of photos. For a print this size, I use 1 milliliter of this outrageously expensive 1% gold chloride solution, 2 milliliters of 10% citric acid solution, and then enough distilled water to end up with 40 milliliters total of toner. So I guess 37 milliliters of water. It's not that much liquid, so the flat bottom tray comes in clutch here, letting me make sure the entire print is covered in this small amount of toner. I tone for 6 to 10 minutes, which I believe is toning to completion and completely exhausting the gold in the solution. You can see a subtle contrast increase, and the print gradually changes from brownish to pinkish, starting in the highlights and eventually getting to the shadows too. You may or may not be able to see that under the yellow light. I have a dim battery-powered nightlight mounted above my table that I'll turn on to check the toning process sometimes. I use this toner one shot, so it goes down the drain when I'm done. Now that it's toned, my evil alkaline tap water is actually safe. A quick 1 minute rinse in the sink and we're ready to fix. The fixer is basically sodium thiosulfate. I think you can fix it with just about any fixer you already have, but I've never experimented with that. I just use the formula from Sandy King's website and it works great. I fix for 4 minutes. If you tone before fixing, there should be little or no change in your image while you're fixing. Apparently if you fix before toning, the fixer can bleach your image somewhat. I don't really know, I've never tried. Now we just need to get the fixer washed out of the paper fibers. 2 minutes in my normal strength Kodak hypo clearing agent and a 30-minute final wash should get the job done. If all my Calotypes have fixer related degradation in 20 years, I guess we'll know that my washing method wasn't good enough. The print looks great, and while it's still wet, it's kind of a brownish pink color. As it dries, it will cool way down and end up as a really nice purple. I hang mine to dry overnight on the line. It might curl just a little, but nothing like silver gelatin fiber paper. HPR is well-behaved stuff. Here's the final print under daylight viewing conditions. Calotype is a pretty sexy process, and a nice way to mix things up if you're tired of silver gelatin for some reason. There are actually a ton of pitfalls and nuance in getting the process to work for you. I had to go through a lot of trial and error to land on results like this that I'm happy with. But it's more than I could succinctly cover in a video, so if you're having trouble, feel free to leave me a comment and I'll see what I can do to help. I can also recommend Photrio forums, which is where I get a ton of help from people who know what they're talking about. Also, Googling Sandy King Kallitype will get you a very comprehensive article from someone who knows even more about this process than this random guy you're watching on YouTube. Check him out. That's it, folks. That's my Calotype process. Thanks for watching.